so
Yep.
I'll speak them anyway. Okay. Oh no, I am not.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm just going to start. All right. So, a couple of years ago, I made a I was going to make a presentation, then couldn't be there. So Nancy Trimble did it for me, but I talked about genealogy, or she talked about genealogy before the internet and all the differences that that computers and the internet have made. So I'm going to just quickly show a few of those, but some of you have seen it already, so I'm just going to go through it really quickly. Okay, so what do genealogists do? Well, they're tracing their family tree, they're finding their relatives, and more people are doing it these days. They used to travel to find information. You'd have to go all over the place and go into libraries and things and take handwritten notes and check all your relatives' attics, go to cemeteries, and they would use genealogy societies and conferences and family reunions to help them. And if they wanted to if they wanted to talk to another genealogist or family member, they would send letters with self-addressed stamped envelopes. So you can see it wasn't very efficient, but it's the best they had. They'd make their charts by hand, sometimes from forms or just drawing them. And then they would try to publish their information. They would try to publish their information, but they could maybe only make one copy of their book, or maybe more if they had carbon paper. Okay, but then came microfilm, and microfilm is really the first databases and online, not online, but repositories. And so people could access large amounts of information, but without having to travel a long ways, because they made copies of these microfilms. Okay, and then when photocopiers came out, the genealogists were just in heaven. You know, they could make copies of things instead of having to write everything. Okay, and in the 1970s, when the mainframe computers started to work on genealogical material, this is when the first big indexes came out, and some of these are what are the basis for now some of the online material that you see. The Ontario Land Records, newspaper indexes like the Bowmanville Statesman newspaper index, which was actually a summer project for the 100th year anniversary of Canada, and the International Genealogical Index, which was from the Mormon Church. Okay, so word processors and genealogical software, I'm not going to talk much about them now because that's another topic, but they sure did help with genealogy. Okay, so then comes the internet, and of course, email helped everybody, not just genealogists, but some of those indexes that I was showing you on microfilm and microfiche started to become, to be put online. Not the documents at the time, because the amount of space that documents would take was just too much for what was available at the time, but indexes to the documents and message boards, so genealogists could talk to each other, meet people they didn't know already, to send a letter. And once digital cameras and scanners became popular, then people could start to scan their own or copy their own documents or include photographs. And people started to make websites, but the storage was very small. And so they could only put low-res pictures or none. And of course, internet speeds were slow too. So if you even did manage to put a big picture up, a lot of people couldn't download it. Okay, so then came the new century, and all these digital things started to come out. They had big databases of information, but because the download speeds were so slow on the internet, they would put them on CD-ROMs and people would buy them at conferences. That's when blogs came out and people could post their research results. And there were programs out there, that would generate HTML trees, and then you could put your HTML tree on your website. Okay. And near the end there of that that decade, people were having laptops and they could carry their genealogical information around with them. Okay, as time went on and more and more people had high-speed internet, and then they could look at maps and digitized documents at home, or if they still didn't have enough speed on their internet, they could go to the library and do it. Okay, so now we're coming up to more some of the things that people use now, online repositories. And some of these are very large and they have a lot of documents and transcripts and indexes on them. Some of the ones you probably know, it's Ancestry.com, Find My Past. Family Search is one that I'm going to talk about later. There's government archives, and there's newspaper archives, historical and genealogical society collections, and university projects, and many other things like that. Just as soon as web storage space started to come down in price and internet speeds went up, all of a sudden everybody just jumped in and started expanding the amount of online material. Okay, so here's one of the early ones that was up, the US Social Security Death Index. And so this is an index. It doesn't have the documents, but there are 86 million records at the time I made this scan. There's probably more now. And originally it was up on its own website, but then Ancestry.com has acquired it and put it up there now. So the difference between the index and the documents is that the index doesn't have all the information in it, just what the people typed into the spreadsheet of the index. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Family Search, because to me this is the most useful of the online databases and repositories. Family Search was put up by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's part of their religious practice that they find out about their ancestors. And so they have a lot of volunteers and they spend a lot of money collecting information about genealogy. And they had it at first on microfilm. They have a huge collection of microfilm. And then they started scanning the microfilm and putting it online. And so here's an example of what it would look like. And you could type in a person's name. You could type in if you know when they're born or who they're married to, and you could end up, it would search through and try to find documents about the person that you're looking for. Okay, so for instance, I found this record about a man named Daniel DeLong, but it's not my Daniel DeLong, it's another one. And so it is showing me a piece of the census record that he is on. Okay. One of the things that's nice about Family Search, well, one of the many things that's nice is it's free. So if you were thinking of going and joining one of those paid services that has all kinds of online documents, I recommend that you go here first. Because of the fact that it's free, you can find a lot of material at no expense. And then if you don't find what you need, then you can try one of those ones where you have to pay a subscription. Okay. So, and because it's free, and they don't have any particular reason to try to keep you there if it's more interesting for you to go somewhere else. So quite often, you'll see something in their index that is from another site. And when you click on it, it'll send you off to another web page that's not on their site. Whereas the paid ones will rarely do that. They'd like to keep you there, so you will keep doing more on their site. And every time you go there, there's more stuff. So
And
yes. Yes.
Linda's still muted.
is that Canadian as well?
Family search is worldwide. So the thing is, you know, people became Mormons at a certain point, but their because it's a fairly relatively new religion, their ancestors weren't Mormons. So they have to, that means that they have relatives who aren't Mormons, and therefore they are just happy to have everybody use this website from all around the world, because if it helps them find their ancestors too. So.
And I find, just if I can add something, I'm not a Mormon and I don't believe Ann is either,
Oh.
but they're very helpful. And you might be going to cover this, but if you go into any of their family history centers, they'll never, ever mention religion to you while you're there. Just to avoid any issues or being accused of it, I find totally no mention of it whatsoever, because they want everybody to take part.
Okay, thanks,
And
Bob.
Ken,
Yes.
that document you have showing right there, is that an actual sort of a scan of a document?
Do you mean the government archives one here?
It says Dominion of Canada. I don't know what it is.
New Brunswick.
Okay. New Brunswick vital statistics.
Yes, that's probably what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to talk about that next. Okay.
So somebody has physically scanned every one of those?
Yes. So what happened was the New Brunswick government, you know, their archives, they started out by making an index. Remember, I was showing you an index earlier. It didn't have the documents, just, you know, the names and a few dates and things like that. Okay. So they started out with that. When they put up their website, that's all they had. And that was a lot of work, because these are all handwritten documents. So somebody had to type everything. Now, if you see this little box here, that's what was in the index. So originally that's all you could get. But then when they had them all done, well, of course you never have them all done because people keep being born, but when they were up to date, then they started, and yes, the government there has paid somebody to scan all of the original birth, marriage, and deaths from as far back as they have.
So where do they store all that? Because it must.
Well, archives tend to have big warehouses places, and there have been known to be situations where people have didn't have enough space, and they've microfilmed things or something and then thrown out the originals, making other people cringe.
Oh,
You know? But anyway, yes, all of these, and I believe every province in Canada has these. But originally all you could get was the information in this little box,
okay.
although it was useful. But if you look there, there's lots of extra information. Even though you can only see half the page, you can see that it says this fellow was a blacksmith.
Right.
You know, it's not going to say that in the index. So the people who have relatives in New Brunswick were quite happy when they started putting the scans up, because they got all kinds of extra information, just not the date the person was born and what township. Now they can tell who their parents are and what job their parents had and where they lived, all kinds of things.
And
So they-
also by seeing the original, you can tell if they made an error when they were doing this transcribing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's an interpretation probably too, is it?
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, yes.
Because like not everybody's printing is,
Yeah, this one's not too bad.
this
Yeah.
one's not bad by the looks of it, yeah.
Well, for instance, Dan, his name being Daniel, okay, a lot of times in handwriting, Daniel looks a lot like David,
Oh,
right? If people haven't been careful to close the letters, and things like that, and there's been a lot of errors of that kind of thing. Now, if you have local transcribers, like local people making the indexes, they tend to be pretty good. But for instance, Ancestry.com, when they were trying to get a lot of records up, and it's a commercial company, they had to save money. So they had a lot of the transcribing and indexing done overseas by people who had never seen the areas where the documents were from and maybe didn't even speak that language.
right.
Okay, and so they would come back so many errors in the index that you had trouble finding the document.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you might look at that Wilmot or whatever, New Brunswick, and it might look like something else to.
Yeah, you might think it's Millwatt. Right? Yeah, especially the handwritten parts.
Yeah,
Yes,
'cause it's their best guess, right? Yeah.
that's right. And so the better sites have a spot where you can email them and say, this really should be that, right?
Right. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So the storage of this though, it's not all in one location, I'm assuming.
Well, the New Brunswick vital
No, but
statistics
like
are
the-
probably all in
The
one
one
place.
from the church one there.
Well,
like-
the church one, they have a huge hollow mountain full of microfilm.
But I mean, it's not, is it all on microfilm or is it's online though now, right?
No, so what they're doing is they're scanning the microfilm as fast as they can, and they're also taking in already scanned material from other people that are donating it to them. And Bob, do you have anything more to say about that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
some of
there'd
it's
be
some
hard
data.
drives and all that full of data storage.
Yeah, so
There
they've
must
got
be-
huge
must be.
servers.
Yeah, it would have to be, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all temperature and climate controlled and, secure against any disasters.
Hopefully all not in one place.
Is that the one out in Denver or somewhere out there?
Utah.
Utah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they probably have quietly got some backup storage sites as well, I would hope.
I would hope so, yeah.
Yes, yes, okay. Well, once you have microfilm, you can make copies, right? And once you have digitized stuff, you can make copies. It's the original documents that have to be looked after so carefully.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so now another type of these big online databases that are used by genealogists are newspaper repositories. Now, unlike Family Search and ones like that, the newspaper repositories aren't made specifically for genealogists. They are made for general use by many people in many topics, but the genealogists really like them anyway. So this one, newspapers.com, is one of the larger ones. There's also the British Newspaper Archives, and there's all kinds of different ones. So here's an example from newspapers.com. Now, it is a site where you have to pay, but if you haven't been on it lately, they'll give you a few pages for free, and then they'll come up and start making everything blurry, so you can't read it unless you pay, right? So, and so here's an article here. Okay, founder of Delong Furniture Company dies. That was a long time ago, and so they've done optical character reading. So optical character reading, of course, is much different from indexing. When you index, for instance, if I were indexing this newspaper and I came to the word merchant, which is my maiden name, okay, if I was making an index that was an index of names and I found a guy and it said, and he was a coal merchant, well, I wouldn't put that in the index because his name isn't Merchant, right? But the optical character reading doesn't know. The software can't really read. And so it puts everything in. And sometimes it makes mistakes. Like, I don't know if you notice down right over here, it says he took up as a sideline, right? It's supposed to say undertaking, I think. They had no idea what that, the software could not read that. It was probably a blotch on it or something, right? So optical character reading is good, but not as good as having someone who actually understands English type it in. Okay, so
It's Peter Clifford.
the other thing that sometimes happens is you've got these newspapers with 5 or 6 columns, and the optical character reader, if they haven't put lines between the columns, which I think they did on this newspaper, then it'll just read straight across. You get one line from this article, one line from that article, one line from the next article. It's pretty bizarre. So optical character reading, on the other hand, nobody has to sit there for a gazillion hours typing an index. So that it's much, much cheaper. Okay. All right. So here's a local newspaper collection. It's called the Ontario Community. Sorry, I have noisy neighbors. Ontario Community Newspaper Portal. And so I went in here and I typed Dan's name, and I found that he's written a letter to the editor in the newspaper saying that the mayor should give up his parking space in front of the library in the town hall. So
That was John Mutton.
I think Dan had forgotten he'd done that, but newspapers never forget. So it's very, very useful. Genealogists look up obituaries, for instance, and marriage announcements, but also just there's in these community newspapers, there's a lot of little columns, you know, saying who went to visit who last week, you know, and how they were related, and sort of gossip columns, really. You know, so okay, so now there are some large commercial repositories here that you may have heard of some of these, and there are many more. I just picked out a few that I knew of, and these companies you have to pay a subscription fee to. That's why I was saying go to Family Search first, and you know, when you can't find something there, then you might want to try one of these pay ones. They each have their own strengths, and they have services that beyond just keeping a lot of documents. For instance, on ancestry.com, you can build a family tree and on there, just as if you might have wanted to do on your own website. But it's easier to do there because they've got the software all set up. And Bob, did you want to show some of your online stuff that you do with these sites at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
I will unshare and see if you can. Okay.
So, for example, Ancestry, going in, here's a family tree for myself. And
you put up photographs, those photographs in there.
yeah,
Right?
so there's me. There's my mother. I never put a picture up with her for privacy reasons. You can see it's marked living. My father's deceased, so put up a picture of him. There's my grandfather. There's my great grandparents, and then great. If I click on here, it'll take me back more generations, and just
He's been working on it.
yeah. So there's more and more generations that you can do, and this is now I've been lucky. I had started this. I'm on a lot of sites, and each once you put one on, and you got to, with a lot of them, you're adding individuals one at a time, and you got to be careful. you can bulk add, but you got to make sure if you've got other family trees somewhere else that you have everything matching. So I actually gave my sister administrator privileges over this account, and she's added a huge amount of information for me. And the nice thing is we found very few, she's doing her stuff her way and I've done it my way. And most of our information is actually agreeing with each other. Did you want me to show any other sites or?
Yes, whatever you have there that's,
Okay, like here's the, whoops,
might as well do it instead of we keep switching back and forth every few seconds.
yeah. Oops, I'm in, share screen. Here is, this is on my home computer system. And so I use a program called Ancestral Quest. And you can keep putting more and more generations in. You can sort it by family, name list, descendants, individual information, like there's, you can put notes on yourself. Pedigree just gives you a very quick, and as you move up along it, you can see more and more generations. As you can see, I've got 6 generations complete. Generation 7, I'm missing some people.
Now,
But-
Bob, you were telling me that you could take that and put it on the internet. Where on the internet did you put it?
I've put it on places like I've worked on Family Search.
Mhm.
So I've put, let's see, just switching screens, share screen. So there's my Family Search. So this is the Mormon one. This is totally free. And I can similarly go back and back on this.
Is that a private tree or not?
No, I don't do anything private.
Oh,
I
okay.
put up everything public because I find by doing that, by sharing, you get a lot of information.
Okay,
Other
but
people,
I mean, is it your individual tree or is it part of the world tree?
it's my individual.
Oh, okay, I guess that's what I meant. It's your personal tree. I shouldn't have said private.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bob,
so-
you've been showing landscape, I guess. Is there a portrait view on that? I think I noticed an option for portrait.
Yes, so going back, oops, share screen, going back to Ancestry. So you just click here and it changes
Hmm.
there.
And so did Family Search.
Mhm.
Yes, Family Search can change it as well. And it depends which site I'm on, which way I do it. I tend to be a very linear thinker. I like myself on the bottom and going back up to the guys in heaven. To me, it just makes a logical sense. But then, so I'm in Ancestry right now. And you can see that Sue here is no relation to me whatsoever. She's a friend on Facebook. We were talking, she had some family names that were similar to some of mine. So I gave her administrator privileges on my account, which you shouldn't do. But she likes to play around and she added a whole bunch of names to mine because she was wanting to check to see if her family tied in. Jennifer Bacon here, that's my half sister. And so I'm a Bell, she's a Bacon father. So she's put up hers and allowed me full access to it so I can poke around and look for errors. Did you want me to go on to DNA?
Well, I'm gonna do the DNA a bit later.
Okay, so now I'll stop here.
Okay, yes,
Okay,
okay, all right. Bring me back. Move this thing out of the way again. Okay. All right. So there are various companies, and they each have their own strengths. Some of them, the strength is that they have more documents for certain areas of the world. And some of it's just that they've been around longer and have more features. So I'm not going to talk as much about them just because there's so much information about them already. It's pretty easy to find. Okay. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about are collaborative projects. There's a lot of giant websites out there where instead of having people being paid to put information into them, the people just put information in because they just love to do it. Okay. So here are some examples. So this picture here is from Find a Grave, and it says 190 million monuments or memorials. Okay, so they put up their website. People started taking pictures of tombstones and putting them up there. And now they have 190 million. So here's a Delong, for instance, and someone, I think it was my friend Roy, he's put up this picture of the tombstone saying what cemetery it's in and information. Now, the thing is, some of that information is on the tombstone and some of it has been put in and you never sometimes don't know by who. So you have to be skeptical. Even if it's on the tombstone, you have to be skeptical because sometimes people will put in a birth date, but if the person's 92 years old, probably none of those people who are writing that down were there when that person was born to know that the birth date is correct. So here's a description which may or may not be correct. Okay, so here's another one where instead of writing their own description, they copied in information from the Oshawa Times, actually. So that means the information was probably put up by the person's children or spouse or brothers and sisters. It's more likely to be correct, not absolutely sure to be correct, but more likely if it's coming from a document than just from somebody's remembrance.
But even with documents, you have to be careful. I've got one relative in every census, her birth year moved up a bit.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes people don't always tell the truth about their age.
Yes.
And yes, also with census documents, sometimes the person wasn't home and the person that answered the door just took a guess. You know? Okay, so here's another collaborative project called WikiTree. And this is a website where people put in information about their ancestors, and anybody can put information in, but it's sort of like Wikipedia in that if you're working on the same piece of the tree, it's just one giant tree for the whole world. If you're working on the same piece of the tree as another person, then you have to discuss with them and argue why if you don't agree about the dates or something like that. And they have arbiters who come and help you if you can't agree. So things usually turn out being pretty good that way. Okay, here's an example of a tree from WikiTree. So, and I don't know if you notice right up here, instead it's showing that there's some documents there. So I can't show them right now because I'm on a slideshow, but as well as a tree, you can make a little area for a person and put up documents that are related. It's not the same as the big databases that have documents about everybody. These ones just have documents in the space for that person. So rather than having to just a link to them in some big database, you have a scan of the document or the photograph and something, you put it right in there. And so this allows people to sort of use this website sort of to make their own genealogical, almost like a book, because you can go into each of your relatives and put all kinds of information and pictures and their marriage certificate or whatever you'd like to do in the space that goes with that person. Okay, so here's Family Search again, and Bob was showing you his tree. And this is one for Dan here. This person in the middle is his great grandfather, and off going this way are the ancestors, and in this way are on this side are the children. So oh, pardon me, descendants. So anyway, so it's a little bit different. I shouldn't have gone forward quite so fast. But the thing about this tree is it is not Dan's personal tree. This is another world tree, just like the wiki tree, except this one's on Family Search. And they're trying to get everybody in the world to contribute to it. They have some methods of trying to get you to be careful when you put things in, but still there are a lot of duplicates, and then there's a lot of incorrect stuff because some people are more careful than others when they on their research. So the software on these ones that allow collaboration has to be pretty tricky because you have to be able to undo a lot of things and fix that up when people make a mess out of your tree. But on the other hand, you get a lot of help finding information. So Bob says he hasn't been doing that. He's keeping his own tree, right? So
No, sorry, I misinterpreted your question.
sorry,
No,
sorry.
no, mine is all LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, mine is totally public. Are you going to mention the cell phone app with that?
I hadn't even remembered about that. So please do, Bob.
Okay, with Family Search, you can access it on your cell phone. And if you're at a meeting, for example, you can enable that you can be found, and you can say search for relatives. And if there's a relative in the room, it will tell you that you're related to somebody in the room. So I might not know that Anne and I are related. We're not, to my knowledge. But if we were both in the room and we both had a link through this, and we both hit our app on our phone, it would say, oh, you've got a relative in the room here.
Yeah, like the COVID app, only nicer.
Yeah, like the COVID app, only nicer. Yeah. Well, I guess it depends who you find you're related to.
Well, our friend Nancy Trimble was very excited when, I guess, well, just before COVID, when she went to a very large genealogical conference. And there were all kinds of people there. Every time she would walk down the hall, it was going ding, and she was meeting people. And so, yeah, it works particularly well at genealogical conferences. Yeah, thanks, Bob. I'd forgotten about that. So.
By the way, Anne, I'm just recently used Family Search.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For my mom's side.
Mm-hmm.
My grandma, she had my grandmother that passed away. I tried to find out where she comes from.
And did you?
Yes.
Excellent.
She was born in Ontario. Her parents moved to Ontario, but the family is originally from Quebec.
Mm.
So I was able to find the tree from the United States Family Search.
Mm-hmm.
And it will help my mom and I when I go see her to go to the library, the National Library in Quebec,
Yes.
at the old port.
Yes.
To see my grandmother family.
Excellent.
Like where they came from, because it's interesting to know.
It sure is. Thanks, Red. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one now. Okay, so sorry, you can't see the word automated here because it's behind that thing at the top, but this is another collaborative project that's been around quite a while called automated genealogy. So the census documents and scans have been released by our government archives for a number of years now, but it's really hard to find your family on a census because of the fact that they're just done in the order when the census taker walked down the road and saw the next house and the next house. And so there's no order to them alphabetically, for instance. And so all these scans were put up, and then people started browsing through them, and through this website, they could decide if they found their relatives on a page to just go and type the information from that page into a spreadsheet like the one you see at the bottom of the screen. And then if other people came along, they would be able to quickly find their relatives, because now they would, the software made an alphabetical index out of that. So at first it wasn't all that useful because only a few pages were done, but now there's several censuses that have been totally done. And so they're working on an extra project where they link them all together. So if you have a relative on one census and someone knows that's the same person on another census, then they will put a link to that too, and saves you time looking at every census. So this is another project that's been quite successful over the years that was all just done by volunteers, and just a little bit at a time, and eventually it was all done. Okay, so now we're looking at social media and smartphones. And of course, you members of the computer club, you all know a lot about social media and smartphones. And so you can probably guess what the genealogists use them for here. So I've got a few notes about that, but the same things that other people use them for. But one of the things that was very nice was that you can put your family tree info in the cloud, for instance, and access it when you're in, I don't know, Australia, whatever. So, and also you can, there are special groups. This one called Vintage Oshawa is one that Dan particularly likes. So people put up old photographs from Oshawa, sometimes of people they don't know who they are, and other people try to identify them. And so there's a lot of things that you can do with social media that are hard to do without. So, okay. So the other thing that genealogists do is they take workshops over the internet. And I guess people have been doing that a lot this year since they can't go anywhere. Been doing a lot of things. I know the musician friends I have been having virtual music lessons over the internet and things like that. So it's the same thing. The genealogists are taking lessons on how to find their ancestors. Okay, now we're getting to something that is been in the news a lot lately, DNA testing. So when these DNA testing sites first came out, the first thing that people wanted to use them for was to find out about their genetic history. And so you can see this is a picture of where my ancestors lived. So you can see they're pretty European, I guess, right? Right. So anyway. But then after a while, there started to be a lot of people had sent their DNA in, and the sites started having software that would compare one person's DNA to another. So for instance, you could find relatives that you didn't know you had. And you might not recognize this, but along the bottom there are the 23 chromosomes. And so this is, I'm comparing my DNA to another person, and I can see that that person is my second cousin. Now, they're not all that accurate sometimes, in that when you get DNA from your parents, you don't always get exactly half, and you don't always get the same amount of this and that. It's only sort of statistically random. And so sometimes that person might be your third cousin, or sometimes it might be your first cousin's grandson or something like that. But so they're sort of going by the amount of DNA that you share. And sometimes by looking at the patterns of it, you can tell more, but it's not as simple as it looks on those CSI programs. Okay, so there's a little more to it. I was watching a show the other day where somebody said, "Oh well, we can find out if those two people are related." And within 20 minutes, they'd done their whole family tree and had found out that they were third cousins. So, well, there's a lot more work to it than that. Okay, so this is a chromosome browser, and here there are 3 people's DNA being related to me, and you can see that this first and third person here are about the same amount of closeness to me, and the one in the middle is only about half as much, and that's because this person in the middle is actually the child of one of the others. Now, if you look at that, can you tell which is the orange one a child of the purple one or a child of the yellow one? Take a look at the overlapping chromosomes and see if you can tell. Anybody have an idea? Not even Bob?
Oh, I know.
Okay.
Did you want me to say, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Nobody else is speaking up.
Okay, so here it's confusing in that, the purple and the orange or yellow both are similar numbers. So you might think that they're the most closely related. But the chromosome browser lays out where your chromosomes actually match, like on which sections.
Mhm.
So you can see on section 2, orange and yellow have a large degree of overlap.
Mhm.
And there's only, and both of them with each other, but both of them only have a small degree of overlap with purple.
Mhm.
And you can see that in some of the other ones. So taking a quick look at this, you would say orange and yellow are very closely related. All their overlaps are very matching.
Mhm.
Whereas purple is probably about the same distance away from both of them.
Yeah. So the purple person is maybe on the other side of the family.
Yes.
They're just as closely related to me, but
Mhm.
not to each other so much.
Yep.
Anyway, so all right. Now here are some of the companies that do DNA analysis. Okay. Probably the best known one is ancestry.com because they have so many ads on TV. Okay. But there are a number of other ones. I just put 4 up here, but I know that there are quite a few more than that now. But these are 4 of the ones that have been around a while. Dan and I sent our DNA to 23andMe. Sorry, I keep touching things.
Other way.
Other way. Gee.
Yeah.
Okay, we sent our to 23andMe, and so those examples that you just saw were from 23andMe. But if you go to the other ones, they have similar ways. Some of them do it with little pictures, or you might see a database with the numbers lined up or something like that. But they usually they all have some way of telling how closely people are related to you. So Bob, did you want to show your DNA stuff here? That might
Sure.
be a good spot. I will stop sharing.
So what I'm sharing here, like Anne mentioned about how you can go in and see where your origins are. And so this is 23andMe. So this is the same one that Anne tested by. And this, it tells me where my family came from, shows it on a map. I can zoom in and zoom out. These are screen captures I did earlier today, just to make it quicker. Interesting also right here, it targets, sometimes they target ethnic groups that can be identified. So it identifies that I've got 0.7% Ashkenazi Jewish. Now, I mentioned that because watch what, in general, the maps as I go through them. I've done it with 5 companies. So here is Ancestry, and it gives me 1% of European Jewish. The map's a wee bit different, but you see, they've also picked up, I've got Western and Central Ontario and Ontario settlers. Obviously, other family has tested, so it tells me that if I'm looking, I've got other relatives. So that's, here is family tree DNA. It shows, again, ethnic origins. Living DNA is very, it's a European one, English, very detailed for England. So you see it doesn't just do a blob. It, especially for England, it shows me exactly where they think all my relatives come from.
Now, Bob, would that be because a lot of their customers are in that area and so they have
Yes.
lots of data to work from?
Yes, and that's something, when you're going through these ones, different, like Ancestry got its start in the United States. So the people you get are going to be descendants of, more probably of the large groups that moved into the United States. Here's the same for MyHeritage. And again, and just the Ashkenazis, you see I'm up to 1.2% here. Interesting, MyHeritage is based in Israel, which could explain why there's a higher Jewish percentage. Remember, the ethnic origins, they're always refining that based on user submitted data, which can mean if I think that I'm, African, and I submit that I'm African, and enough people do that, all of a sudden I show up as African, even though I'm not. I go by a rule of thumb: if it's under 5%, don't hang your hat on it too much. Back here, so I'm back into the screens. I did a couple, I've already shown that. 23andMe, you can put in your family tree. It's got a different way. I haven't put much data, but if you see the people identified, and you can't read it, I know it's too small, but they've automatically generated people that they see as related to me and a guess of how they might be.
Mhm.
Here's that's the Ancestry, that's family tree. Just to give you another idea, this is familysearch.org. It has the widest variety of tests. And what's showing here, you can see I've taken the autosomal test. The autosomal test is what Ancestry offers. I've also taken the Y-DNA test. That's your father's side. I've taken it up to the 700. Every time you go up here, you pay more. So I've paid. And the mitochondrial, that's your maternal line. Again, I've done the full. And each one has its little advantage. I see you're going to cover. So 23andMe, this was just an example. Here's, it shows people that are related to me. You just ask it to show your DNA relatives. Here's the same thing for Ancestry. And you can see Jennifer's my sister. Larry's my dad's second cousin. Amanda's a niece of a second cousin once removed. And so that lumps them as closer relations. And you can see this number of centimorgans. just take my word for it, just tells you how closely you're related, how much DNA
The
you
more
share.
centimorgans, the closer you're related.
Yes. Yeah, and so you can see the very close ones have high scores. Going into family tree DNA, I've tested my mother on that one, and you can see shared DNA, very high number. Jennifer, half sister, high number, and then it goes into other people. And you can click on if it's that thing shows me if they've got a family tree, and I can look in on it. GEDmatch, you're going to cover separately. Living DNA, that's that English company. One thing I like about this one, it tells me who the people are again, but tells me how active they are. So if they sign into the site a lot.
Yes.
So, and I've actually done it. I've sent an email to Jill saying, wonder how we're related. Because I see she's more active than Sean, even though Sean's a closer relative.
So 23andMe tells you when the person last logged on. So that
Yep.
helps a little bit. If they haven't
Yep.
been on for 2 years. You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And my heritage, again, now you notice Jennifer, my sister, she's put herself on a lot of the sites as well. She's only got into it this year. But with a lot of the sites, you can share from one site to the other. Sometimes there's a fee, sometimes there's not. Some of them don't allow it. But you see consistently Jennifer pops up.
Okay. All right. So just have to click on it there. Okay. So now those companies we just talked about are ones where you send your DNA into them and they analyze it. And then they have software that does many other things with the information. But there are also companies that don't collect any DNA. They just collect the information about the DNA. And I guess the best known one is GEDmatch. Okay. WikiTree is also starting to collect DNA downloads, things like that. So you think, well, why, if you've got your DNA tested on one site, why would you want to send your data to a site that that doesn't actually take real DNA, just data? Well, the idea about GEDmatch was that it's expensive to keep putting your DNA in all these sites. And because there's so many of them now, there might be people that are related to you and they haven't been doing what Bob is doing and sending their information to every site. They might have only just put it in one site. So people can take the DNA from the site that they have put it into, or they can take the information about the DNA and they can upload it to this company called GEDmatch. And so if I have tested with 23andMe and Bob's got his profile on Ancestry and we both put it into GEDmatch, it will tell us if we're related. Okay, so that was the way it got started. One of the issues there was that it seemed to have a lot less security. Like if you took your DNA profile and uploaded here, a lot of people could see it. So so some people were worried about that and other people did not care. So, okay.
If
So
you can stop share just for a second, I'll show them the button about allowing police.
Good.
Okay, I've got that queued up. I think here's the interface for GEDmatch. And so I've got my mom and myself, and you have to opt in. And I've specifically opted in that I'll share my information with the police. And you have to do that by choice. The reason you do it is, and somebody at our Genealogical Society gave a very good talk on it. Think of all these Jane and John Doe bodies they find. And that's somebody's brother or sister or child. And that person might be, they have their person's DNA, but they don't know how to find the family. Well, if I've tested and they put the DNA in and bingo, it shows that it's a cousin of mine, well, then they can contact me and say, okay, we want to see your family tree. And hopefully put a name, and they've located a number or put names to a lot of people, and also solve crimes.
There is an article in the Star, I guess a week or so ago, about a fellow that is looking in exactly that sort of thing for two children that were found in the woods. And he's got a team of genealogists, and they're working together. They have those children's DNA, but they don't have any relatives to test them against. Nobody has reported them missing, I guess, that will give DNA. So, yes, I put a link to that article at the end of the it's not a PowerPoint, but at the end of the show anyway. So, yeah. Okay, so I'll share my screen again.
Yep.
And okay, so with GEDmatch, this was sent to me by Nancy Trimble. She's blanked out the names of the people here because she didn't ask them if they wanted to be in the presentation. So these are people that are related to her, and you can see that they've got the number of centimorgans that Bob was talking about right here. And so that's a very high number. It's probably her mother, I would think, that is there. Okay, so, and she's got 2 or 3 other very high ones. It might be sisters and brothers, or and then it goes down as so that you can sort them. It's a big database, and you can sort them different ways. Okay, so then you can look and see which of these people maybe you'd like to contact them, or that you might not have found them on the site that you sent your DNA to. Okay, so now also see how it says largest segment. Those are DNA segments, the segments with the most centimorgans, because usually when they say that many centimorgans, they're not just one big strip of DNA. There's a little on this chromosome and a little on the other one, so anyway, if it's a very small piece, it might not be significant. It could be just a random happening. But if it's a big piece like this, then it's almost certainly related. Okay, so here's another thing from GEDmatch. And you see the different colors. This is just one of the chromosomes here. That there was a big long list of chromosomes, but in order to make it big enough, I just had to show you the first couple. Okay, so the yellow here, okay, is people who have on the chromosome, one of the genes is half identical. Now, the reason it would be half identical is because you've got half from your father and half from your mother. So these one little green ones here are full identical. So how could you get a full identical? Well, perhaps your father and mother were distantly related or something like that. There could be a reason. Okay, so and sorry, got a very sensitive mouse pad here. Okay, so you can see that you can tell very accurately, just like that chromosome browser that I showed you earlier, even more accurately, which parts. So it says that the red ones are parts where there's no match at all. And the software has determined that these blue sections here are significant sections. Okay, so now here's another company that sort of does the same thing, but it's not as well known. They don't, I think, have ads on TV, but they're known in the scientific community. And they do the same thing as GEDmatch does. And but they market their, it's an open source project among a bunch of scientists, and they send their DNA database out to scientists to use the data sets for research. Okay, so yeah, well, Andrew says, or Dan says, for machine learning, and that's one of the things that, like artificial intelligence, they try to see what they can learn from the data sets. So it's a little bit different. That they don't have the other parts that will help you find your relatives. They're interested in finding out information that will help them to find out more about the genetics of people. And medical. Okay, so one of the things that Bob mentioned before was it's called forensic genealogy, and as well as using it for identifying people that you don't know who they are, it's also being used for solving criminal cold cases. And the first one that got a lot of publicity was when they used GEDmatch to find the Golden State Killer, who was, well, not a very nice person, who done all kinds of terrible crimes. And they were able to arrest him after many, many years by using a combination of techniques. So that the DNA won't do it by itself, because even though they put his DNA into GEDmatch and it came up with some people that were distantly related to him, but nobody that was closely related. So they had to use genealogical techniques, standard genealogical techniques, going and looking up records and finding out what areas people had been in, and all kinds of the things that genealogists are always doing, until they could narrow it down to people that they could test. So
Ultimately, the DNA did do.
now, as a Canadian case that was done not too long ago, you might remember this was Christine Jessup's killer was found the same way. And they had to do a lot of research about that. And I put a link at the end in case anyone would like to read that article in the CBC about that case. Yes. So, oops, guess there's something, but a word I didn't need there. All right. Okay. So I didn't put all the links to all those companies up there because almost all of them are just the name of the company.com. But I did put a few things here that I thought might be a little bit harder to find. For instance, Family Search and OpenSNP are .org, so you might not think to put that. And here are a couple of those articles from the Forensic Genealogy and the Ontario Community Newspaper Portal, which some of you might want to look at just out of local interest. There's the link for that, and the New Brunswick vital statistics, because it's got a kind of complex URL there that might be, it was kind of hidden down inside their website, not on the front page. Okay. So Bob, did you have anything else you wanted to?
Are you going to make your presentation available, or?
Hugh, have you been recording it?
It did say at the beginning.
Oh, it did say at the beginning it was being recorded. So I'm
Yeah.
presuming it is, and then he would put it on the website.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
But you copied your slides. You need that.
Oh, yes, Dan is pointing out that because my slides are strange looking, I will also put a copy of the slides so people can look at them without the little blotch on the top.
And if anybody ever wants information, you all know both Ann and myself and Dan. We're always willing to help.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now. Yeah. Okay. So, I hope that was helpful for genealogists are so happy about all these online repositories and software, although sometimes it digs into their pocketbooks, but not as much as traveling to England to look in a archives or something like that. So it seems like some of them are expensive, but really they save you money in other ways on traveling and that sort of thing.
That used to be the way they do it, eh?
That's right.
Travel to the place, right?
That's right. You had to, that's the only thing that you could do was to go there. Or, well, actually, there is another thing that people did was they would hire a professional genealogist. So if you had if you had someone information you wanted to look up in Ireland, and it was very expensive to go to Ireland, you would write to a genealogical society in Ireland. And if you could either get a volunteer to go and look, or if there's a lot of information, you could hire someone to go and look up the information for you.
And never presume anymore that information is not available. Never presume it is, but there's a book that was actually a 2-volume set that was a major research project. It happened to feature my family quite prominently. When the books were published, it was a big splash at the University of Toronto. The pre-publication price, I got, $50 a piece for the books. Just recently, I was looking, and I found both books are now totally free. And the books were only printed like, I'd say 20 years ago at most. And both books are available in PDF for free.
Well, they probably sold out their paper copies and it wasn't worth printing again because people like ebooks these days. So
well, it was a Jackman family that it sponsored it. And so I don't think it wasn't done for commercial reasons. It was done because their family had come over on an immigration scheme.
And if they made a small number of copies, they may have needed to charge that price to recoup their publishing costs.
The book was commercially available, and I think it still is available in Chapters or Indigo, but they've also made it available totally free.
Well, probably people who are closely related will buy the book to have on their shelf, and the people who just want a bit of information out of it will get the PDF.
Yep. So it's really good, and with this DNA, it really does open up a lot of doors. It doesn't answer the question. To me, the TV ads are a wee bit deceiving. You don't just send in your money and there's your family, but sometimes you could be sometimes you could be lucky.
Yes. Well, Dan and I were very lucky even before this, because when we started doing genealogy many years before the internet, one of the first people we found was a fellow that had 5,000 pages of information about the Delong family. But not everybody is that lucky.
No.
Amazing, yeah.
So,
I have
Any
a
other
question.
questions?
I have questions for Bob. And please forgive me if you've already mentioned a couple of things. I got disconnected twice, and Microsoft said it was not handling the stuff properly, and I had to reboot twice. So you might have covered it. But you went into the situation where you said that you recognize that you have some background with relatives going into the Jewish branch of the Ashkenaz group.
Yes.
And what I'd like to find out is, were you able to determine, first of all, which side of your family you came through on that area, and also around the time period when maybe like that era or whatever the time frame was when your relatives were of that background?
Not yet. In fact, I think it's on my mother's side, but I don't have enough data. So it's a case of now looking at going back and doing sort of the paperwork, finding other relatives on my mother's side and looking for ones that might be Jewish. And
so now, Bob, you tested your mom's DNA, right?
yes.
So if it was on your mom's side, then it should be saying that she has some, and it should be more than what you have, right?
I believe it does show that she is. I should have signed in. I'm signed into my family thing. I could sign into hers and just see, but
but that would be one way to tell anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Did you find that there are living relatives of Jewish background or of the Ashkenaz background now, like through your research, or you just don't know? It's just like.
No, I don't know. Now, what makes me suspect, even before I tested my mom, there was a story on one of my mom's sides, the Martins, that there was a Jewish connection. Now, I was told that it was probably false, but they said some great uncle used to say he knew some Jewish people, and he used to tell his Jewish friends that he had a connection. And the person that told me said they always presumed that the uncle that was saying it was just saying it to be friends with his Jewish friends. But it could, and that's where it gets interesting, because sometimes crazy uncles are actually right.
A lot of these
Talking about
stories
the
have a
uncle,
grain of
just
truth.
hold on a second. Talking about this uncle,
Uh-huh.
was he alive at the time when you heard
No,
about
no,
this?
he was long dead. It was an 80-year-old told me that her uncle had
And where
told
was
her
the
that.
uncle from? Where was he from?
Here.
Canada?
Yes, here.
Okay. I
Yep.
just want to warn you, and I don't
Yep.
know if you know this or not, but this is a warning.
Yep,
In our religion,
yep.
the religion is passed on through the mother.
Oh,
You may wind up finding out that you're one of my tribe.
oh.
No, quite seriously.
Yeah.
The religion is passed on through the mother. There's a whole story behind all of that. But if the mother was Jewish, then automatically the child is Jewish, even if she wound up having a mate that was not Jewish. It doesn't matter. It passes on automatically.
Yeah, so it'd have to be the mother's mother's mother, though. And I'm not sure where it comes through exactly.
Okay. Well, you'll keep us abreast, right?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yes. Well, both Dan and I have contacted a number of relatives since we put our DNA in that we didn't know we had, and also a couple of relatives that we did know we had, but had not seen for like 40 years or something, and now we know where they are. So so it's been an interesting experience, and it's a hobby that takes up a lot of your time.
Keeps us out of trouble.
An interesting story, Ann.
Comment that I have a lot of information that was passed down to me from my father to my great-grandfather, back to my great-great-great-grandfather. And it was all down on paper and so on. Anyway, I put the information on the internet, and I got an email from a woman in Australia, and turned out that she had been trying to figure out, she knew her origin was around Halifax, but anyway, she came over, and then eventually I went back and visited her, and she had my great-great-great-grandfather's family Bible, or at least the front pages from it. And it had recorded in there in handwriting the names and birth dates that were all on my paper. It confirmed they were all right, but there was no DNA testing or anything like that.
No. Well, so now this is one of the things that it's sort of a caveat is people tend to believe that because so much information is on the internet, I mean, there's a lot of information on the internet, but it's a very small percentage of the total amount of information that exists in the world. So people, sometimes they look on the internet and they say, like, I couldn't find it, so who knows? I'll never be able to find it. But really, serious genealogists don't just look on the internet. They use the things on the internet to give them clues to where they can look for things that have not been digitized. And there's a perfect example there. Ed has a family Bible. Probably that family Bible may never have been scanned. And there might be information in that if someone went to visit Ed and looked at the Bible, they could find something new.
And you can trust them.
Yes. And because they've been written by the family members at the time, put the births put in the Bible. Well, and that's another thing too. You look at the Bible, and if the all of the names for 100 years are all written with the same ink, then what does that tell you? They weren't written at the time, put in later. So then you have to look again to try to find some corroborating information. Yeah. So Dan was a very early adopter of this DNA. When the Sorensen company from Utah came to a genealogical conference, it must have been what, 20 years ago, and they were taking people's DNA for free because they had no database, and so they needed somebody to get started. So they weren't charging at all.
The cotton swab.
Yeah, yes, it was a cotton swab. And so Dan put his in, and about 6 months later, he got an email to look at a website, and he found a relative that was related to him, but you had to go back about 8 generations before they were related. And it was through the Y DNA, because Y DNA, it's the male chromosome. It does not change hardly at all from generation to generation. The other DNA gets all mixed up, but that chromosome stays the same. And so this fellow's name was Delong. So we figured, yep, that's got to be a relative. And so then that lets you know that chain of fathers was pretty straight. So.
I have an
And
interesting
you
story.
mentioned, sorry, you
My
mentioned DNA several times. How do you get a DNA test done?
Oh, okay. Well, those companies we were just mentioning, the ones that I had the big pictures of their logos on the screen, Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, what was the other one? MyHeritage. You buy a kit from them, and it comes in the mail, and some of them you spit in a little container. Other ones you put a swab on your cheek, and then you put it back in the container and you mail it off to them with money. You have to pay to get the kit. They had, right? Yeah, you pay for the kit, and then you mail it back to them, and they send it to a lab, and they analyze it, and then they'll send you an email saying, look here on our website, and when you log in, you can see all the information. So Bob's done this quite a few times.
Yep.
I have an interesting story about Ancestry, Ann.
Uh-huh.
My stepkids, my wife's kids, gave her a kit about 5 years ago, and it sat on the desk, and they have an expiry date on them.
Oh.
And she's adopted, so she knew that, and she was 20 years old, and she found her adopted mother, but her birth mother didn't want to meet her at the time. She didn't know why, but anyhow, like I said, that was over 20 years ago. So she had this kit from the kids, and I said, "You gonna do anything with this?" And I'll condense the story. And she said, "Yeah, okay." So she did it. She sent it in. So we're camping, and she gets a text, email from this guy, random guy, because you don't put your credentials on Ancestry, your last name, just your account info. And he says, "I need some more information." So he asked her all these questions, and she went. When we came back from camping, she went into Ancestry and she added all this extra information. So then he sends her an email and says, "I think you're my aunt." And he says, "Here's my number. Please give me a call." So now she's got this random guy giving her his number. I said, "Well, obviously he has legitimate reasons. So just call him on the house phone, because you don't have call display or call any of that." So she calls them, and it turns out that yes, it is her nephew. She has 5 sisters and a brother she didn't know existed. She found her mother. We went and had lunch with her birth mother. Her mother gave her the whole reason why she gave her up for adoption at 17 years old. And it has been an absolute unbelievable experience. And now her mother has cancer, and she's thought she met her.
Oh. Yes. Well, when you send your DNA to those companies, everybody cannot see the DNA information. The only people that can see it are the people that have come up with a DNA match. And
Yes.
even at that, you have to agree to let people see it. So you
And-
can, there are different privacy settings, you know.
Yeah, and some people, as you say, use a fake name. On mine, I use my full name.
Well, you're a genealogist. You want people to find you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah, and she didn't go deep enough, but it turns out that her nephew has been into this like you have for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And he said, no, if you had clicked on this and clicked on that, it would have connected you to your mother, because he did all the DNA for his mother and all of the siblings. So it's all in there. And she knew around where her mother was born. She was born in the Niagara region. And that's where Lynn was born when she was given up for adoption. And he says, yeah, he says, and mom was this and mom, he says, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. It's a dead giveaway that we are definitely related. So yeah.
Sometimes it's a little disappointing because there are people who send their DNA in. They're not interested in meeting any relatives. They just wanted to know where their ancestors came from. You know, the part that Bob was showing you with the little maps.
Yeah.
They just want to know their ethnic, or possibly they want to know some of the companies, 23andMe does this. They'll tell you, they have a group of genetic characteristics, and they'll tell you if you're positive or negative for certain things, you know, the medical conditions. So there are some people who want to know, and they send it in, especially adopted people. They might not know if they have inherited a gene for a disease, for instance.
That's mainly what Lynn wanted to know too. And she wanted to know because she's had lung issues and this and that, but she's adopted. So it didn't. And just so you know, Bob, Lynn's maiden name is Martin. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's a reasonably common name.
And like 23andMe, for example, you have to pay extra for the medical test, but I've done that. And here's an interesting thing. So I'm 82% more, have more Neanderthal DNA than most customers.
Well, not me. I'm 96%.
Okay, so we're both apes.
And my
And-
mom was 99%.
But there's health and traits overview, and before you can see this for the first time, you have to go through all sorts of watch these videos. And for example, it says I'm at slightly increased risk of celiac. This variant detected, but not likely at increased risk. And if you listen to their videos, they're very careful. But it shows, you know, basically, so if something popped up that you were a carrier of something, well, maybe you might want to check that out with your doctor.
Yeah. But they want to make sure they're not giving you medical advice, because that would be illegal. So they have to make sure that you understand that these are just percentages, and you know, they're not saying you have a disease and that sort of thing. You know.
And it even gets into, like, I was looking for it. So, you know, all sorts of stuff. Likely of similar weight. Likely to be more, I'm a sleepwalker, or always was, so likely more than average movement, so that fits in.
You don't sleep when there's a full moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That goes with the that goes with the ancestry.
Now, my mother sent her DNA in. She wanted to find out, you know, I think she just thought there might be something interesting to find out, but it turned out that she was like totally all British Isles ancestry, and she didn't have any propensity for any diseases. She was 92, and she was very disappointed that there was nothing to gossip about at all in her DNA profile.
And you have to be the sort of person that and that's a warning for any of these. You have to be the sort of person that would not get terribly upset if you send in your DNA and you send in your mom's and it happens to say that you're zero match. And it does happen.
Which it would for Lynn, because she's adopted.
Yeah, but then, and we've heard at other cases where people like 80 years old knew all their life they were adopted, do not know a single living relative, had always wanted to know, submitted the test and found family. So there's nice stories like that.
Yeah.
But you can.
Well, exactly. Lynn's in her 60s and she just wanted to find her mother. She didn't even know her mother was even alive. Like she didn't. Anyhow.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that to be cautious about. If you are thinking of getting life insurance, for instance, if you send in your DNA and you found out you had something serious, like for instance, Huntington's disease, okay, you sent in and you selected the health thing and you went all through the questions, they're warning you, are you sure? And then you looked and saw that you had Huntington's disease. You couldn't then go to the life insurance company and claim you didn't know that you had this disease. And well, no, with Huntington's disease, it's no, they can tell that you're going to get it. So like there are some diseases where it's just, as Dan said, a propensity. You might, but with some diseases, they can tell from your DNA that later in your life, you're going to have terrible health problems. So if you're thinking of getting life insurance, get it first, then send your DNA in, because what they don't want is people that have discovered they're not going to live long, and then they go and take out health insurance or like life insurance, because of course, then they're going to lose money on that, right? So.
Now, do the life insurance companies go to these sites? Do you have to, they
can't look at your DNA. And if you go on to GEDmatch and just put a username, then they don't know, right? But they can't go into, say, 23andMe or Ancestry, one of those. And the only way they would be able to look at your DNA would be if they were related to you. And even then, I don't think they can look at your health results.
No, they can't. And one thing too, like with some of them, you're asked specifically, do you agree to share your results also for scientific research? Mm-hmm. And with totally anonymous? And I always say yes. Mm-hmm. And there was some group, and it was for police down in the States. They work with law enforcement. They had an ad on Facebook. Would you please share your DNA with us? I contacted them, check them out. And yeah, it seemed like a legitimate company. So I sent them their data. Mm-hmm. And when you think of it, you're most likely to be a victim of crime if somebody that's related to you. So put in your DNA so they get arrested before they get you.
Yes. And that's the other thing, that when you say that that you're going to share, realize you're saying yes for your relatives as well, right? Because if you're sharing DNA with them, if your cousin is a bank robber, they're more likely to be caught, right? Yep. So, I mean, if that bothers you.
With some people, they'll instantly go out and share.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyhow, there is a lot of good stories. Some people end up with, oh, I did it, and oh, I shouldn't have ever found my mother because now she won't leave me alone. Like,
no. She's a nagging mother.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and it is true that you might find something you really weren't expected, some part of your ancestry that doesn't jive with the family stories, So, but I think this forensic genealogy is going to make a big difference in the future in solving serious crimes.
Yes.
I mean, they're never going to be able to afford to hire a bunch of genealogists to go and find out who was double parking, downtown, that sort of thing. But when it's murders and other serious crimes, that leave DNA involved. To me, privacy is less important than catching people like that and getting them out of our society. So,
And one of the things I like about it is it does show how closely we all are related.
mhm.
Like I had no serious inclination that we would have any Jewish relatives. Now that's neat now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So Dan has discovered that that he is about 1% indigenous.
Ah.
And he sort of already knew that. There were family stories passed down, but it's nice to have the family stories found out to be true, you know,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, and you never know who you're gonna meet. Like all these people from Lynn's family that we met, they're not. Some of them are unbelievable. Like her sister and brother-in-law up in Bancroft, they own a house building company. They build sustainable houses out of foam. It's a foam instead of, yeah,
Hmm.
A foam home?
yeah,
The only problem with those foam homes is the mice that they make little holes in them.
yeah. But yeah, it's just unique on how many people you find, and yeah.
So if you're thinking of starting to look for your family tree, I would highly recommend starting with Family Search, just because of the fact that it's free and it's a very large database, and they have a very well organized like search engines, and they also, if there's a good record and it's not on their site, they'll send you to it anyway if they know about it. And
Hmm.
so,
Mike is saying great meeting.
okay, I guess-
Well.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. So,
We've had a very interesting discussion.
Yeah.
I wanna thank Ann and Robert and
Very fascinating, yeah.
and Dan and all for a very interesting look at this topic. And
Thank you very much. That's so interesting.
yeah, it's really in depth. My own ancestry is Maltese, and I very much doubt that a lot of people have been going in the basements of old churches in Malta, digging up records.
why not?
Oh, they do it all
Simple,
over the
the
world.
church won't let them in.
Mhm.
Very interesting.
And anyone who's a serial killer probably shouldn't go into this.
That's right. Don't become a genealogist if you're going, and don't send your DNA into the database.
Well, they just caught a rapist and on a cold case, and he'd sent his DNA into one of these sites, and we came up, bingo, they got him.
What a chloromoron.
Well, so not all criminals are Einstein.
No, if they had any brains, they'd have an honest occupation.
Yep.
Yeah, they'd have their own like website, like web, what do they call it? A startup, right?
Right. That's right.
Very interesting, yeah.
By the way, Anne, for finding my family tree or family ancestors, I have to go to Quebec's websites that have all the information, and there's also the another one that is free, is Genie. It's GENI.
Yes, yes.
And
that's good.
that one I did some search on my grandfather and my grandmother husband.
People whose relatives were born in Quebec are lucky because the Quebec government has done very good records of births and marriages, and they're very well organized, and they've had the people whose relatives were born or married there have been able to find things long before other places, just because the government did a good job.
Nice.
But what's really hard to find is if you have First Nations part of your family, and you want to know which tribe or which like information about who they are, it's really hard to find who they are because there's no archives of sort to find people.
Well, I think the DNA will help with that eventually, you know, after there's a bigger databases, that they'll be able to sort out some of this stuff.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, there was a story in one of my family lines way back that there might have been some native relatives. Probably not, but maybe. But to me, it never looked probable. And the person that told me thought it was never probable. But and then when we do the DNA, and they all come up with 0. So you know, our it was a question of where, yeah, it was a question of where we descended from. I think it was a first or a second husband. It was pretty obvious we were the first. And the DNA shows it.
Interesting, yeah.
Lynn found out her grandfather was a master carpenter. So we got all this profile thing from her mom when we went to visit her once.
Nice.
And then her mom had one of the tools that her grandfather made.
Oh,
That's
Oh,
cool.
wow.
He made that tool?
Yeah,
Nice.
he was a blacksmith and a carpenter. Anyhow, it's interesting. Like you said, when you said that, when you saw one of the scans and it said blacksmith, and I
Yeah,
remember that.
that's right. It's very interesting. Now, we looked up on the British news census, and one of the ones, it looked like it said his great-great-grandfather was a lawyer. And we thought, that's really strange. How come his son ended up being a carpenter? Well, it wasn't a lawyer, it was a sawyer. He was a sawyer, which makes more sense when his son was a carpenter, right?
What's a sawyer?
A person who saws things like it.
Yes, look like this.
Yeah, the S and the L, it was hard to tell. But so that's why those handwritten records sometimes have errors. So it looked like lawyer, but it was Sawyer. And a Sawyer is a person that like works in a sawmill, right?
Wow.
It's interesting, yeah.
Okay.
So are we winding down?
Well, I guess we are. The next topic would come up would be, are there any bugs? Yeah. I think bugs would be the next.
Well, I had a bug. I couldn't get my PDF file to show properly on Zoom.
Well, but it wasn't a PDF. You were in some other application. I could tell that. You hadn't converted it into a PDF. You were in a presentation program.
Was it the Windows PDF viewer?
No, it was just PDF. It was just a PDF, and I was using Foxit PDF reader. So
It could be a problem with Foxit.
it might be a problem with Foxit. Yeah, it was throwing itself in front.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe I'll solve that by next time.
And Bob's got a bug too, because he's got a thing from an antivirus protection that he doesn't even own.
That's right.
Oh, I stopped that. It just popped up when yeah.
Well, it sounds like someone was trying to get you to click on something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I was afraid of. I thought, oh, if I wasn't sure if I'd accidentally clicked on it, but I hadn't. So I managed to get it closed.
Well, closing it was the right thing to do.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Wow. Scary.
I have a question I've got. It's a different relation thing altogether. In these days, we keep changing computers. And I had a lot of information on a family tree maker, and it included a bunch of pictures. Now you can take a JED club and take it to another computer and so on, but it does not take the pictures.
It doesn't take the pictures. No, you got to put them in again.
The pictures can be included.
No, there's another way around it. I had it on one of mine, and I ported, how was it? You've got to look on your other computer, and you've got to match the exact file name because it's linked through to a file name. And when I changed from my laptop to the one I'm using now, the file name was slightly different, so all the pictures disappeared. But once I found out exactly what the file name was and set it up exactly, then it found it.
So are you moving it to another computer or another software program? Ed,
Another computer.
another computer, yeah. So yeah, the pictures are not actually in the GEDCOM, they're just in a directory.
Right. Yeah.
So if you go to the new computer and you don't put the pictures in the same directory, it won't be able to find them.
Yeah. Okay.
So both things, like Bob was saying, it's got to be the same file. And it's got, and you've got to move the pictures separately. And, you know, it depends on what you did. Like when I'm doing it, I always put all the pictures in the same directory. If you've just inserted pictures and one of them was from over here on your computer and one from over there on your computer, you're going to have a hard time getting them all moved to the same directories on the new computer.
Okay. Well, it's 9 o'clock. I guess we should adjourn. Any other business that anyone would like to raise?
I was curious to know if anyone saw in June the launch of Windows 11, because I missed it. I was in Montreal for my uncle pass away funeral.
Didn't.
So
There's quite a few
All I know
YouTube
about-
videos.
Yeah. All I know about Windows 11 is I downloaded the computer checker and it told me I can't run it.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. So your computer is too old or it doesn't have enough
Well,
memory?
no, it's a pretty new computer. It just doesn't have this wackadoodle security feature they seem to be demanding.
Oh,
TPM2 or something it's called.
Yeah, which is ludicrous.
They're talking about 8th gen, Intel 8th gen or equivalent processors.
so Dan was thinking we should mention the next presentation.
Oh.
What is the next one?
What is the next one? Do we know?
I believe the next one is Fred. Right, Fred?
yeah.
Oh, good. I got it right finally.
I can give you I know it's gonna be probably backwards, but it's called other social media platforms.
No, it's readable.
Yes, it wasn't backwards. Only you are seeing it backwards.
And the thing is that I use a background like if it was a Chrome in like a Chrome browser page. So each slide will be like if you were on a Chrome environment.
Oh, cool.
Because
I like that.
I get inspired when I do a presentation and I'm like, what background am I using for my presentation?
Mine was pink.
But I already started. I just have to finish it and just put everything customized, like cosmetic, to be presentable.
You got a month. You'll
Yeah.
be fine.
Yes.
Yeah. My last 3 presentations have all used the blue jean background. I think it's time for me to move on. Excellent. Well then, since we seem to be wrapped up, I guess we call it a night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great.